Welcome to the Letcher County History Show here on Channel 98. My name is Richard Brown, and today we'll be talking about the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Pound Gap here in Letcher County, which was a very important battle. Not only did the Union get another victory, a much needed one, but it also later on helped propel James Garfield, who was the commander of the Union's soldiers, into the presidency. But we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So the way it started out was Pound Gap is a very important travel way during the war and before the war. It was known as the Mount Sterling to Pound Gap Road, and it'd been made in 1835 to be able to transport goods from the central Kentucky into Virginia to Abingdon, Virginia. And so it's very well traveled and very important roadway. When the road went across the mountain, it was called the Fincastle Trail, and it would go down the other side of the mountain on Virginia's side and wind around and come out around the mouth of Pound. So it was very important. Up on the gap, you would have had fortifications built, what they called breastworks, all across the gap to help protect it. And you had 60 cabins built, and each cabin would hold 15 men comfortably. So you can see they could hold quite a few men there at any given time. They also had a hospital there and a commissary, a place to hold their stores and ammunition. So it was just about like a small town in itself. Well, the soldiers guarding this gap was called, locally they called them the Pound Gap Battalion, but officially they were the 21st Virginia Infantry. They were under the command of Major John Thompson, which was a brave and smart leader, and he had done very much work to build more breastworks and to make the fortifications strong there in the gap, because he knew that there's a good chance he'd always be outnumbered. So he took and built up out of rock. They built a lot of breastworks. This time I'll read you what Bad John Wright said about the breastworks in an interview later on. And John Wright was there. He was a Confederate there. This description, he gave the description of the breastworks constructed under the directions of General Humphrey Marshall. And in the interview, he said, "I was 16 when the war began, and I helped build the breastworks across Pound Gap. We built a high stone wall up and down the Kentucky side of the mountain, above and below the road, just leaving a passway. Some of the old wall is still there. Some of it was torn down and used when the new road was built. In places, hunters who hold game in the walls have pulled it down rock by rock. We used to stand guard there on two big rocks, Killing Rock on the Virginia side and Picket Rock on the Kentucky side. We camped there for 3 or 4 months down the road some distance on the Virginia side of Pine Mountain. We had a battle right in the gap. I remember I was up on a big rock so I could see better, and a lieutenant ran up and pulled me off. My brother Solomon Wright was in that battle too. He was later killed by some outlaws as he lay asleep one night on High Knob. Our commander was General Humphrey Marshall. He was a big fat man and waddled as he walked." As you can see, that he gave a pretty good description of what he thought that the breastworks were like there, and he pretty well had it nailed back, because in pictures of it you can see it. Of course, now with the new highway, they pretty much took all the breastworks out. There's still a few up higher on the hill, but for the most part, the majority of them are gone. In the area where all the cabins were, it's all been leveled off, and now the service station and stuff takes its place. But it was like a little city in itself, a little town by itself up on top of the ridge. And they had a very important job to do. They had to try to keep the Union Army out of Virginia. Well, going back to the Union soldiers now, they were commanded by now General James Garfield. Remember, he had gotten his commission for having defeated Humphrey Marshall's men at Middle Creek and forced them out. He was now the general, and he decided he wanted to push the Confederates out of Pound Gap as well. So he'd come out of Louisa and marched back down through Paintsville and Prestonsburg, and this is the first part of March. And he marches down and stays a while at Paintsville, and he stays a while at Prestonsburg. And he comes on down later and marches up through Shelby Creek and comes into what is now Jenkins. Of course, Jenkins was not there at that time. And he came up to the foot of the mountain there. And then what he realized that he may have bit off more than he could chew, because he'd slipped up and looked at the fortifications at Pound Gap, and he realized they were very, very tough. And he decided that he probably didn't have enough men to storm it to take the place, even though he had 800 men with him. And the Confederates, he guessed, was between 250 and 500 men up there. He outnumbered them, but he didn't have enough, he didn't think, to push through the gap with that much fortification. And as he sat there worrying about what to do, he got a visitor. And it was an old farmer that came from that area. And he was of course, he leaned toward the Union, and he told Garfield, he said, "I can take you along a squirrel trail," that's what he called it, a squirrel trail, "and take you up on top of the mountain and let you come in behind the Confederates," which Garfield immediately liked this idea, because he knew that there was a good chance then he could defeat them if he could get in front and back of them. And plus, snow had started falling again, and it was a snowy day. This is March the 15th. Well, the next day, at daybreak, before daybreak, on March the 16th of 1862, he decided that he would follow the farmer and do exactly what he said. But he knew that if the Confederates knew he was coming, then they would just turn around and be waiting on him. So he decided to send all of his cavalry, which was called McCaughlin's cavalry, up the road, up the Mount Sterling Pound Gap Road, and let them attack the front of the fortifications and let them think that's where the main attack was coming from. So he sent all his cavalry up the road to attack, and while he was coming up through the hillside. At this time, I'll show you on a map of how the battle took place. Okay, now you have in front of you a topographical map that will show you how the battle took place. Jenkins is right in this area here and up through here today, but at that time, of course, it wasn't there. Well, the Garfield sent his cavalry up the Pound Gap Road, and they came up the hill and up the road and come out in front of the breastworks and opened fire on the Confederates behind the breastworks guarding the gap. Meanwhile, Garfield and the rest of his infantry went up and followed that farmer up the side of the mountain, and he took them around the old trail that took them up and around and up top of the mountain, up here at the main top of the mountain. Now he was northeast of the gap. When he got up here, they come down the hill so far, and he decided to split his army in two. He sent Colonel Jonathan Craner down the hill with the 40th Ohio to come down and come up and come in behind the breastworks. He kept the 42nd Ohio and the 22nd Kentucky and came on down the ridge line, and he was going to hit them on the side this way. But at this time, he gave him a little while to come down, but at this time he did make a mistake, and he didn't give Craner time to come down and come back up. And the reason being because it was thick then, just like it is now with laurel and so forth. So Craner didn't have time to get down and come in. And meanwhile, you got McCaughlin's cavalry still fighting out front. And Major Thompson is easily holding them off. He's not even having to do much effort to hold them off. But at that time, the Ohio's and Kentucky troops hit them on the side up here. And then he has to swing some of his troops around to meet this new threat up here on the north side of the gap. Well, he's still not concerned, Major Thompson's still not concerned, because he can easily hold these men off. Even he can hold these off in the front of him, and he can hold them off on the side. So he's still not concerned, and he's still fighting them. But just a few minutes later, a picket comes running in and says he's seen a bunch of troops coming up the hill behind him, and that'll be Colonel Jonathan Craner, who Garfield had sent down, but he hadn't gotten up there yet. So now Major Thompson is in a predicament. He knows he can't stand and fight all three sides. He could be totally surrounded. So he does the only thing that he knows to do, and that's retreat. And he retreats back down the mountain and flees by the Union soldiers coming up the hill, and cuts down and goes down to Elmira, which is down at the foot of the mountain down there on the Virginia side. There's supposed to be a Confederate camp down there. Major Slimp is supposed to be down there with a bunch more soldiers. But when he gets down there, Slimp is gone, and so he goes on toward Pound with his men, but he runs into Slimp. Slimp's on his way back, and they form up a bunch of breastworks and get ready for an attack down here between Elmira and Pound. Meanwhile, back up here in the Gap, the Union soldiers have now captured the Gap, and they go into all the buildings and start taking anything that they can that is valuable, like food and anything they can find. And then they start burning all these cabins down in the hospital. So they burn it in the jail. They've got a jail there where they keep people in when they would try to get through the Gap. So they burn all this stuff down. And then Garfield, there's a heavy snow on the ground, and it's probably this snow and plus all the black powder smoke helped keep Thompson from seeing all these Union soldiers coming, because you know how the mountain gets foggy. Well, it was foggy that day, plus all that black powder smoke mixed in with it, so you could easily see why Major Thompson could not see all these Union soldiers coming. Well, Garfield has had enough. He's figured that he's done exactly what he come there to do, and so he doesn't try to pursue them into Virginia like he originally thought to. And he comes back out and marches down the Mount Sterling Pound Gap Road and comes back out and goes back down the road and goes back in toward Prestonsburg and Paintsville. He's now got another Union victory under his belt. At this time, I'll tell you the aftermath and the after effects of this battle. As we said, the Union now had a second victory. Garfield had gotten his second one in less than 2 months. He now won another important battle. Harper's Magazine in New York had a drawing made and put in the picture of it in their paper. And this is the picture you're looking at now. And it shows Garfield leading his troops up the mountain. Of course, we all know that wasn't quite the way it happened. His cavalry did go up the mountain, but he didn't. He come in behind them. So it's kind of misleading, but that's okay. He is, and like all politicians, when he ran for president of the United States, he took use of this drawing that was in Harper's Magazine and put it on his billboards when he was running for president. And he was called the hero of Pound Gap and the hero of Middle Creek, and this was one of the advertisements he used when he was running for president. So as you can see, politicians have learned exactly how to do things even from back in the old days, that they knew how to take advantage of something even if they had to stretch the truth a little bit, it was okay, because and that's exactly what they did. They stretched the truth a little bit. Well, just while we're on stretching the truth on Garfield, I'll tell you an interesting story about him. During the campaign, they told the story about him. They said they were coming up the Big Sandy River on flatboats, on a steamboat, and the river was flooded, and they ran into a tree that was out in the water and got stuck. And they said that Garfield begged soldiers to jump in and take ropes to the shore to pull them in, and no one would do it. So he just took his shirt off, put the rope in his mouth, and swam across the raging, swollen river to the side of the bank, and then pulled that steamboat by himself across off the top of that tree, which is a pretty big undertaking. And if you're like me, I don't quite think that really happened. But as you can see, they used it in the politics again, and it did make for a good story. But I have very big doubts of that actually happening. Getting back to her story, though, well, when Major Thompson and his men, they went back up to Pound Gap, and the breastworks were still there, so they could still guard them. But they got orders from headquarters from Abingdon to go ahead and pull back down to around Castlewood, which is now Wise area, but they leave guards up there. And what they would do would, if anybody seen Union soldiers coming, they would rush from Castlewoods back that way to help protect the gap, because now they would have to build all those cabins and all that town up again. And they'd already been having trouble keeping supplies up there, so the commander, which was Humphrey Marshall, decided it wasn't worth trying all that problems to guard the gap. And they done proved it'd be very hard to guard the gap, because they hadn't realized that there were other ways to slip in behind you. So he decided to go ahead and just let a few men just watch the gap instead. And then, of course, Garfield, he was again a hero for having defeated the Confederates. So to show their appreciation, they decided to make him commander over a much larger army and send him down to Chattanooga, Tennessee. And here they put him in charge of a much bigger army, where he stayed maybe a year, and then the politician in him was too strong. So he went back to Ohio. He resigned from the army and went back to Ohio and ran for state office there, and of course he was elected. So you can see how this benefited Garfield a lot, and he also benefited the Union, because they were desperate for good news. They were just having bad news one after the other, and here you had the great victory at Pound Gap. All the Union newspapers all in the North had told about this great victory. Well, meanwhile, back at the Gap, this is kind of related to it, but it's also how a kind of a ghost story got started and been reported down through the years. Well, I was telling you about the Garfield coming down through the hill from above. Well, they had a picket up there, a guard, and he was a young boy. He was just a teenager, and he'd been sent up there to watch for anything. And of course, he had no dreams whatsoever anything would come down through there. And like a lot of young boys, he bored, and he actually fell asleep. And he let the Union soldiers get up on him and by him before he realized what was happening, before he could slip off. Well, of course, falling asleep on guard duty is punishable by death, of course. And the young boy argued his case, and he just didn't dream at all that he would be convicted, because he even confessed to it. And but to the horror of all of his friends and all of his comrades, Confederate officers decided to make an example of him and have him executed there at Pound Gap. And so the poor boy was shot and killed at Pound Gap in the execution style. And even though that he, to you and I, it sounds terrible, but of course, the rules of warfare are harsh at times. Well, needless to say, down through the years, there's been a lot of reports of people seeing a Confederate soldier in the Gap, and especially before the new highway come along, people would say that they seen a soldier walking back and forth along the ridge line above the Gap. Well, back a few years ago, about 2 or 3 years ago, when we dedicated that new monument up there at Pound Gap in honor of all the Civil War soldiers in our area, it's called Brothers Once More, because they had come back and become brothers. It's dedicated to the Union and to the Confederacy. Well, we decided to dedicate it, and so we had reenactors come from all over, and they were going to shoot and have speeches and so forth, and had some politicians there. Well, we had handheld radios, and we sent one crew over on the other side of the gap, on the side where the service station is, and they drug a small cannon up there and was going to fire it to start the dedication. Well, one of the guys running overseeing the dedication looked over there and seen a soldier standing out in front of the cannon, just a little ways up the hill. So he hollered on the radio and told those boys not to fire yet because they had somebody standing in the way. And they hollered back and said, "No, there's nobody over here with us." And he said, "Yes, they are." He said, we got people seeing him standing all the way from over here. It's somebody dressed in a Confederate uniform. And so they said, "Well, we'll walk up through there," and they begrudgingly walked up through there. But as they almost got up to where the soldier was, all of a sudden the soldier just disappeared. Just couldn't see him no more. And then later on, we didn't think much of it, and they told him to go ahead and go back down and fire the cannon. And then later on, we got to talking to them, and they said, "Well, we never did see the soldier." And we told them, said, "You had to see him. He was walking right up to him when he left." And they said, "No, we never did see anyone." So we're pretty sure that was the last instance we know of for sure that the ghost of that little poor old sentinel was seen. So maybe sometime another, driving through there at night, maybe one of the visitors to Kentucky or the people from Kentucky going to Virginia may see this poor old boy that's probably been roaming the hillsides up there for 150 years now. But that's a ghost story, and maybe it's true, but I just know what we saw at that time and what we've heard other people say they had saw. Well, from then on, the gap was guarded by both armies. The Union would guard it a while, then the Confederates would hold it for a while. So neither our side held the gap forever. Well, again, it was the 150th anniversary of this battle, and I just wanted you people to know or realize that. And some days when you ain't got anything to do, drive up to the gap and drive up and go look at the monuments. You'll be real proud of what Letcher County has done up there with those monuments. Because they're dedicated to both sides, the Confederacy and the Union. We didn't, and the monument itself, the big monument, is facing north and south, and we done it on purpose to show that, north and south was now together. And go into the pavilion there and read the story of the battle and the mapping of it as well. And then if you get a chance, come down here to the museum, the military museum in Whitesburg, and look around. And you'll see that we have a Civil War section in here, and you can look at it as well. And you can see some of the stuff for yourself. But try to learn about your past and your history and be proud of who you are, because Letcher Countyans have every right to be proud of what they've done in the past and what I hope they do in the future. Thanks again for watching Channel 98 and the Government Channel. And this is Richard Brown with the History Show, and I'll be seeing you again. Goodbye.